This is Maharajas of Scale, a podcast where we go behind the scenes and talk to founders who are demolishing the myths around building and scaling a big business in India. These are the stories that have shattered the assumptions around Indian consumers and are changing the game completely. I am Krishna Jonakadla, serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Flit, the fashion locator in town, and startup mentor, bringing you these stories. Hey everyone, this is Krishna Jonakadla from Maharajas of Scale. Today we are going to today we are speaking to Akash Gehani of Instamojos, a company I greatly admire for the kind of innovation that they are bringing out in the FinTech space. Akash, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Krishna.
Instamojos is a very interesting company. From my time in the US, I have seen Square and Stripe change the payments landscape. And I've heard this from Sampath in one of his talks, that a lot of people think about other enablers in the ecosystem, but payment is a huge enabler. It usually is considered the last mile, but I believe if it is architected properly and looked at properly, it usually is the first mile. Because if I'm assured that I'm actually paid, then a lot of friction in commerce actually gets out of the way. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So to give you a gist of, why payments and, how we got to payments, right? No one really grows up thinking about, what payments is or, how do you really solve it or make it simple. At our core, right? So Sampath, myself, Aditya, like the founding team, right? One thing that we were always excited about is how do we help small businesses? And, we always believe that India is a land of small businesses. There are like millions and millions of them. And if I go back to about 2011 or 2010, when the germination was happening, internet is going to be coming in. Technology is going to be like a tsunami for, businesses out there. How can we help them adopt technology and grow their business? And it was within this framework, how can we help small businesses? Is, where we got thinking and we tried a few things. So before Instamojos, we tried a couple of things which didn't work out, right? We spent a few months, maybe a little more than a few months on a couple of ideas which didn't work out. And at that point is when we figured that payments is at the core of a business. If you're doing a business, there will be payments involved, right? No matter how big or how small. And this is kind of a pain point which is being felt by everyone. And we were having a chat before this, right? How Square made it simpler for, say, a cab operator, like a taxi driver or an ice cream vendor on the road to collect card payments. We felt to do it online, there is no solution. Yeah, internationally, there would be something like a PayPal. But in India, and again, I'm going back to 2011, 2012, there was nothing, right? You would have to, if you're a physical retailer, then you could have a POS machine. But to do it online, there was just no option. And we said, can we make this simple? And that was just the seed thought, right? Could we do it? And yeah, things happened. There was certain demand, certain adoption for it. And that's how we got here. So the idea is always, how can we make it really simple, right? And payments, like I said, is at the core of every business. If you are able to do it, there will be millions of businesses out there. As long as you can give it to them in a reasonable, simple, affordable manner. As simple as that.
We'll come back to the two failures preceding Instamojos, but let's get the scale aspect out of the way. In terms of the scale that you're delivering today, the impact you have had on the payments landscape and the small and medium businesses and maybe single entrepreneurs that are operating out of homes. Talk about that scale. What does that look like today in terms of the impact you've delivered?
There are different ways to look at impact. I always look at, some of the anecdotal pieces that we keep getting on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, just to give you a sheer sense of, what scale are we at, right? And I don't think they're at a great scale. There is the road is way too long. There is a lot more to do. But today, we have 1 million merchants on Instamojos, right? This is, of course, which has happened in the last 6-7 years. What we are proud of is that we have acquired all of these merchants purely digitally, right? There is absolutely zero, feet on street approach, if you call it. And when we started out, that's been, one of the questions that we always faced, be it internally or, from others, right? Be it investors or anyone else, right? How can you acquire merchants? And acquiring a small business is a challenge. It's a different ballgame altogether. And I think that's something we've done very well, right? So 1 million merchants on the platform today who are using Instamojos to collect payments, to set up their online store, to ship their products to their customers, to do multiple things, right? Essentially about growing their business online. And we are signing up more than a merchant a minute today, right? We get about 2,000 merchants who come to Instamojos every single day. And what we are proud of is that we don't do too much about it. Like, we can essentially take a holiday for most of us and, turn off everything that we have, and this will still keep happening because we found a need over there. Their merchants are like really happy, and, they spread the word. So most of this, if it's digital, if it's organic, it's because they find something of value which they refer to others and, which keeps getting the next set of, businesses in. So that's something we're really proud of. Yeah, that's a scale, right? So you have 1 million merchants, they get started, they collect payments, they collect loans from us, do all these things. And of course, that leads to like 1 million odd transactions that we look at on a monthly basis. So yeah, I think that's good numbers to look at. What we've seen is, to give a bit, right, about, if I go back, say about, 3 years or something, right, about more than 2/3 of our businesses, or merchants on Instamojo would be coming from the bigger cities, right, the tier 1 cities, typically. Today, that number has inverted. In fact, it's less than 1/3 today. Like, a growing number are coming from the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. This is something that we're always hoping for, always looking at, but it's just happened to us. So there are many of these things, right? I would say we've done few right things here or there, but haven't really planned for some of those. So yeah, you do the right things and things keep working out from there. So there's some of the trends that we've seen. The number of women entrepreneurs, for example, or women-led businesses who've been signing up recently, that number has been, as a proportion, that number has been increasing. I think at a total level, it's still very low. But again, that's the nature of demographics that we are in. But there's some of these very healthy trends. People coming from smaller cities, people coming from different backgrounds. I think that's something that we've seen happen, and most of it has been happening organically. So there are things which keep us excited, which keep us motivated for what's out there.
So the tier 2 and the tier 3, that's really interesting. Because the common perception is that mobile users, empowered, upwardly mobile users, are all stuck in the tier 1 cities, which have a certain type of behavior or who display a certain type of behavior. Are you seeing analogous behavior from users or merchants that are signing up in tier 2 and tier 3 as well, or they are fundamentally different from what you see?
I won't think they're fundamentally different, but yeah, there are certain patterns or certain behaviors which are there. So again, a very similar trend which actually goes very well in line with this is till about 3-4 years back, right? And when we said that a majority of our merchants are coming from the bigger cities, the number of merchants coming from a desktop was very high. It was close to 80% about 4 or 5 years back. Today, that is again less than like about a quarter. So 3/4 of our businesses now come through a mobile device, be it your mobile app or mobile web, right? But they're coming from mobile devices. And what we've seen is, especially, over the last couple of years, is many of them do not have a desktop because they get started with a mobile phone and they use just the same particular device. So yeah, and I think if I look at the numbers that are coming from tier 2-3 cities has been increasing, the numbers that are coming from mobile phones is increasing. I think there's a very strong correlation between that. So in terms of how they have adopted the product, how they've been using it, I don't think there's too much of a difference there. In the sense, every businessman is smart. They know what their business needs, and you give them you give them anything, right? They know how to make the most out of it. So the way they have adopted and used the product is very similar. For example, say you start collecting payments online, right? And Instamojos is a very small brand name. So many people may not know of it. And especially when dealing with someone's money, right? There is always this trust factor. What we've seen is when someone gets started, you take your time to get on because you want to be very sure. You know what? Will my money come to me? So what we've seen is, for example, a business would take a payment of 10 rupees. Then they'll wait. They'll see if the money goes to the bank account. After they feel, oh yeah, the money comes. But again, this slowly gets built up, right? You take a payment of 10 rupees. Then slowly you do a few more transactions. So there is this time period which we said, this is the amount of time it takes for that trust to be built, for you to start trusting us with your money and with your business. And it takes like a few weeks for them to really ramp up before you actually have a sense of, how, or rather, their entire business being used on Instamojo, or for them to use online payments for it. Now that's the behavior which has been fairly the same across the bigger cities or the smaller cities, across a user who you would call maybe a tech savvy or an urban consumer vis-a-vis a non-urban consumer, right? So it's not very different. It's just that, the devices and all that matters, and of course, which has an impact on, how you design the product, how well the sensibilities are, does it work on mobile or not, does it work on, say, a lower bandwidth or not? But the way they adopt, what all they do with your product has been fairly the same. There isn't too much of difference on that.
We'll do a little more of a deeper dive in a few minutes. So we'll come back to the couple of failures that you spoke about. And is it fair to assume that the three of you were together in those two as well?
In one of them, yes.
Okay. So how did the three of you happen to meet? How did you get together?
Oh, that's an interesting story. Sampad and I had earlier worked together. So Sampad had started a company back in 2009, and I had joined that company, and we worked together for a short while, and so the company got acquired. After that, I moved out of it, but we stayed in touch. Right, there's always this urge of doing something independently after that again. Right, so we stayed in touch and we connected over the next few months and years, and that's when there were a couple of ideas that we were dabbling with. And at this point, he was working somewhere, I was working somewhere, but we figured, this is going to be a problem where it's again maybe time to get out of a comfort zone and try it out. So that's why we tried a couple of things, and that's how we met the other founders, Harshad and Aditya. So the interesting thing is, of course, we had a little background, Sampad and me, but for the four of us, and primarily the three of them, I call the other three as, in those days, I would call them a Twitter addict. These are, some of the early adopters of Twitter in this country, right? So, and if you go back to 2006, 7, 8, right, when Twitter was still a new thing, and especially very nascent in India, there's a very small community. A very small number of users were using it, which led to a lot of this born homie, a lot of personal connections between them. So I would say Twitter is the place where essentially the team has come together. So that's how we knew each other, that's how we got together. And when we met a couple of times initially, I think we just hit it off. I think culturally there was a lot of, I would say, chemistry there. Not that there are a lot of similarities between us. I think we still have a lot of disagreements and we fight every second day, right? But I think culturally there was certain chemistry, right? And I think it was only there because, if not personally, we had seen each other on Twitter, communicated with each other over an extended period of time. So that kind of gave us an insight into who this other person is, what their likes and dislikes are, how they behave in general, right? So I think, that helped it up. So I would totally credit it to Twitter for us coming together.
Perhaps is the first story of, at least I've heard in my personal experience, about a founding team coming together through bonhomie and camaraderie that was forged on Twitter.
Right? You could say that. I mean, I'm sure there are others, and nowadays that's this hashtag as well, right, which keeps going on, of a couple which met each other through Twitter or maybe some other network. They got together. So of course that's the, but
it's very interesting.
It's the fun.
So Jack Dorsey in payments founds Twitter, and then you guys meet in Twitter, and you guys found a payment company.
Oh man, I never put those dots together.
So between the three of you, how did you come to an agreement in terms of roles, responsibilities, those initial days, equity? Those are all very, very touchy, sensitive topics. It is one thing to have personal friendships, but a totally different thing to be in business. How did you get those elephants in the room addressed?
We just spoke about that. We had, of course, a few disagreements, or rather, we had a few debates and discussions around that. So how it worked is, for one of us, it was the first time in a startup. For me, I had worked in a startup earlier, so I had seen a bit of this, but never founded one, right? So in some way, it was a first-hand experience, but I had seen a bit of it earlier. For Sampad, it was his second or third startup that he was as part of the founding team. So of course, he had a bit more experience, right? So I think someone had a certain background, which of course helped us set it up. So it just came together with that. In terms of roles, there was never a discussion, it just grew naturally. So Aditya, he comes with a very strong tech background, very strong on technology, data, math and multiple things. So and of course, Sampad and me are not, I would say, coders as such, right? Not at all. So it was very clear that, this is the guy who's going to be leading technology. Sampad comes from a very strong inclination and background in product and design front. So of course, that's a bit he took over. And my interest always lied in, going out, talking to people on the business side, hustling around, right? So I naturally took up the sales, operations, and those pieces. I think it just flew. I think it's over time that we also figured that, Aditya also understands these things a little better. He could take up these things as well. I have started developing over the years a very strong interest, and I would say maybe a bit of a skill on the product side of things. So over time, of course, we've developed a bit of those things. But when you said there was absolutely zero talk about that, it just whatever came to us naturally. And fortunately, we were so well aligned on that front.
So from the initial days, actually, let's go back to those two failures. What were they about?
Okay, so I would focus on the second one because that's where we actually spent a lot of time. And that is the one where this team, we were working together, right? So we did that for about almost a year, about 10 odd months is what we were working on. So what we're trying to do is, and this is back in 2011. So what we're trying to do is build a platform which helps a small business. And again, the inclination was always towards small businesses, right? How can we help a small business advertise over a mobile platform? This is something like what InMobi does for bigger brands. How can I help a smaller brand do it? But in a very, very hyper-local context. So that is what we are looking at. Say you are in Core Mangla, as we are at this point, right? Maybe a business around you could see that, Krishna is over here. Can I give some kind of promotion to Krishna or some other way get his attention? So we're doing something on that front. What we realized is over the course of a year and, after a lot of trials and errors and, speaking to a lot of people, building a lot of things, is that no one was willing to buy it. We had a lot of businesses who signed up because, of course, it was free for them in the initial days, right? And they saw certain value, but when the time came for them to open up the checkbook, just wasn't happening. And I think over time we figured that, maybe we're just way too early. I mean, this is back in the day that, WhatsApp wasn't on everyone's phone, right? So I think it's still very early. If I had to look at that, could we do that today? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, so I think we just spent a lot of time doing that. But I think what really helped is in those 10 odd months, right? Especially going through from one setback to the other is, it really brought us closer as a team. So at the end of it, when we decided that, okay, let's wrap it up, it's not going anywhere. And again, then the question is, what do you do? Do you go back, look for a job? Do you work somewhere else? Or, do you want to try something else? I think at that point, we figured that, we had a lot of fun doing it. Forgetting all the failures, we had a lot of fun doing it. Maybe if we find something which has a little more value, we should put our heads together and do it. So yeah, I think those failures actually brought us together. It helped us know each other better, helped us develop ourselves, personally. So I would look at that as of course, only in hindsight, you can look at it as a stepping stone. But yeah, I would really, really call it that.
At what point of time did you make the jump to payments? Because your target segment didn't change.
Mm-hmm.
While the hyperlocal aspect perhaps disappeared from the thinking, you were still focused on small and medium merchants.
Right.
And when did you make the jump from saying advertising to payments?
It happened because we actually felt that as a problem ourselves. So during the course of, this journey and even prior to this, Sampath used to take, do these video interviews like we have a podcast today. He used to do these, video interviews with a few folks. And then so one day we were discussing, right? Can we monetize this? And we figured, no, we can't. I would love for someone to pay for it to be able to watch this video. But how do we do that? How will I collect payments for it? And we said, there is actually no option for this. And then we went back, we did a bit of research. For example, I looked at a lot of Facebook pages. And there were so many of these, where individuals, you want to sell off maybe something secondhand or maybe something that you're creating, right? And you're always struggling with it. Collecting payment was just a difficult scenario. And back in Bombay, this entire dabbawala industry is a big thing. There's so many dabbawalas, they deliver. It's like a Six Sigma case study, right? They deliver dabbas everywhere. Even over there, we felt, and we spoke to some of them also, collecting payments is a challenge. You have to rely on a third party. There are always delays, cash gets lost, and this and that. We figured, I think there is something of note over here if we can do that. The challenge was we had zero background or zero idea about how payments work. Right? So we actually went back to a drawing board. We did a lot of individually, a lot of research. How does an online payment work? Right? What is the role of Visa? What is the role of MasterCard? What's the role of every bank out there? How does the technology work? So I think we spent a fair bit of time actually developing all of that or learning all of that. But then we were convinced that there is something of note over here. And of course, this is also the time when you could see globally, right? Companies like Square and others were picking up. I think payments, like I said, is at the core of every business. You help them do it in a better manner. There's a long-term value to be built over there.
So in some sense, when you saw these Facebook pages, we can possibly make the connection now, but they were not part of a marketplace. They were not because once you're part of a marketplace, things like logistics, payment systems, all of them come standard as part of the marketplace. But
Right.
when you're standalone, let's say you're selling on Facebook, you're not part of you are possibly part of a network, but you're still not part of a marketplace. So therefore, some of these aspects do make a huge difference. And payment definitely makes a huge difference. So you, in some sense, made up for the lack that they had as independent sellers and then service providers.
Exactly. So you look at the smaller businesses, right? So one of the challenges I won't say challenge, but like one of the questions you always face is, who is your user? Who is this business who's coming on Instamojos? And I usually do not have a very clear answer to that, because they are so diverse, they are so heterogeneous. There is not one clear category, right? Is it, say, like, is it someone who is running a coaching class, or is it a mom and pop store, or is it something else? No, that's way too diverse. So similarly, when there is such a huge amount of diversity, a simple marketplace approach doesn't work, right? A marketplace like, say, a Flipkart might work if you're selling appliances or electronics or mobile phones, right? Because these are things which can be compared with each other. There are certain specifications and all, right? But when you have millions of businesses and so many different, options of products and services which they provide, you just can't have a plain vanilla marketplace to enable that. That's how it came up.
Effectively, the long tail, where eventually the long tail is going to be bigger than the body that it is attached to. That's how I foresee this.
Yeah.
Because you have millions. And today, while all the volume is coming from the biggies, that's what the pie looks like. But we all know this, or rather, students of economics know that when a country starts approaching middle income status, and when it explodes from middle income into the larger income status, that is when all these minor MSMEs, a lot of them transform into much bigger enterprises. And that's when the explosion happens, and the long tail, which is actually looks thin right now, starts becoming much fatter and a much bigger universe.
I would say it's already fat. Called like the fat long tail. I think India has always had that for various reasons, right? Which we may not be able to delve into. But for various reasons, India has always had, globally, if you look at it, the maximum concentration of MSMEs. And on a per capita basis, right? We have like 60 million MSMEs in this country out of a population of 1.3 billion, if you call it. Like, if you look at it from a ratio level, it's very high compared to most other countries. So, yeah, I think we've always had that. And it could have various reasons, right? But so this trend is only going to grow. I think culturally, one is, in India, you always have this mindset, right? That I want to do something of my own, or I want a side income, or something or the other. You always are inclined towards those things. So it doesn't matter if you are employed or not, you'll always be looking to build your own business. If you have a business, great. You would actually be delving into multiple things also. I think it's going to continue. And what we've seen over the past few years, which is what the internet has helped in a big way, I think it's further going to accelerate over the years, is there's going to be a lot more decentralization. So a lot more power is going to be going, or rather, smaller businesses are going to be a lot more enabled, a lot more empowered than a bigger business. I think that's what has happened, right? Through the spread of internet and, communications and all. So I think this is only going to grow. Today, about 27% plus of India's GDP is from the MSMEs. It's a very healthy number. And if you tell me it's going to grow, then yeah, I would want to spend another decade building solutions for them.
Yes. I want to build on a couple of things that you said. You already have 1 million merchants on Instamojos, and you acquired all of them digitally. Let's put that on one side. And the other side is, you do not have a defined particular user segment or a certain user type. The two actually don't make sense in normal startup circles at all.
Mm-hmm.
You would say you're building a product, pick a segment, these are the characteristics, these are the behaviors that they embody, and then keep building for them. And then an explosion happens. In your case, looks like that playbook has been turned on its head. For instance, if you look at the PayPal use case, the initial users on PayPal were all the super sellers on eBay. That was the beachhead segment that literally gave PayPal the run. And then eventually, then the rest is history. But these are sort of opposing pieces of information. Talk to us about how you got to 1 million without having a defined sort of a merchant or a user in mind. That is interesting. Let's go deeper on that one.
So I won't say there wasn't a defined user in mind, or that we didn't have a mental persona of who a user was or is today. It's just not as traditionally defined as anyone else, right? Like, you would look at a certain category of businesses, right? Say you look at the F&B space or the retail space or say travel space or something, right? I don't think we ever looked at it from that sense, not from a very vertically segregated approach, but more from the sense of, are you one who's traditionally a small business or an upcoming business, right? You're just starting out maybe. Do you want to have a presence online? And this is the most likely person who doesn't want or cannot afford to spend a lot of time chasing, the bigger companies, or, chasing, say, a website developer agency to build a website for them, or chasing a bank to be able to collect payments. They can't do it, right? Can we actually power them in a simpler manner? How we got here? Well, that's a story in itself, but just in a short, to give it in a concise manner. So when we started, right, and like I said, as a team, we came together on Twitter. I think that is also where our customers started coming from, because I think we had a significant enough social presence over there with like a decent social cloud in terms of a lot of folks knew us. And when I say folks, these are also your early adopters, your tech savvy folks, maybe entrepreneurs and founders, right? That helped us get their attention. And many of them also fit the persona of the kind of users that we wanted to get. So it just helped over there. If you look at what we built, right? The essential product was you create a payment link, you share that link with your customer. Like you could SMS it, WhatsApp it, or email it, and they can make a payment to you. Now, that is a link. Now, that link itself is viral because the moment you share it with 10 folks, they get to see it. Maybe out of those 10, a couple might make a payment to you. But there's also a chance that out of those 10, there would be another 1 or 2 folks who actually have business of their own, who might say, I could use this to collect money for my business. We just spread from there. And again, that's something you have no control of, which of course spread across multiple categories and multiple business areas. Yeah, I think we just banged on that. What helped us is having those, call them early adopters, call them thought leaders, but folks who have a significant say, or who are being looked upon by a community. As an example, right? If a famous, say an owner of a famous restaurant uses a product, all the average restaurant owners were actually looking at this and saying, I can maybe adopt this. I think we just had the same effect where from a bunch of different areas, the smarter guys were using us. And a lot of the others came as a result of that. So I think, the very fact that a product had that inherent virality, which is a link, that helped us a lot. The fact that we started with a set of influential folks, that helped us a lot. Not that there was any design to it, but it just flew out of, what we were and the kind of people we knew around us.
You're actually the second startup that we've spoken to in the last 1 month who's talked about Twitter being the source of its initial early adopters. Explara, Santosh Panda,
Right.
built a do-it-yourself event management platform, almost has a very similar story about having entrepreneurs and all these event managers on Twitter. He was very active on Twitter and his own whole user base coming out of it. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
So on that count, the initial days, how were the initial days? Were they fragile? Was it a shaky start? Were any of your assumptions that you had about the market disproved? And how long did it take for you to say, we are out of the woods? A business is never out of the woods. There's always pressures, pulls and pressures. But what are some of the assumptions? Did any of them get destroyed by the market or confirmed by the market? And when did you really start feeling that, yes, I think we have something?
It took a long time. I think like in the earlier days, right, and at least for the first couple of years, while things kept growing, it just wasn't exciting enough. The bigger numbers weren't that great, or in pure terms of percentage growth, it just wasn't exciting enough. Like, we kept looking at why is this not working? Why is this not working, right? Maybe at certain assumptions, right? We felt like, if we do this, and there's always this dilemma, right? When you're building a product, let's add these 1 or 2 features that will help us with a lot of traction. And you know what? You go back, you build those, suddenly you're saying, oh, it's not working out. And it's always that cycle, right? Yeah, maybe the market needs these things. Let's build that. And we kept going down. We kept making those, call them mistakes, or we just kept doing it. But somehow it just didn't work out. But yeah, over time, things kept falling into place. And there were a few instances here or there which really worked out for us, right? So I think it was maybe towards the end of 2013 is, I think, one of the most significant things happened. Like, where we got really picked up in one category of businesses. And, in a day's time, practically, we were doing more on a daily basis than what we did in months prior. So we just took this giant leap once. And we saw a couple of those leaps happening again at in a short enough time period. In a couple of months, we saw a couple of those leaps happening again. And that just proved after that, right? Yeah, I think there is something over here. We just need to kept going, kept chiseling at it hard enough.
What were those segments or categories?
I think one of them was the education space. And we figured that, India is a land of, or, country where it's just too competitive. There are just so many exams out there, right? You have right from your civil services to medical and management and engineering and whatnot, right? There are just way too many of them. And there is this whole new emerging segment. Like today we talk about edtech, right? A lot of companies coming in this education tech space where you're either conducting classes and courses online or selling content online as opposed to the traditional coaching class approach. I think we saw the seeds of this maybe 4-5 years back, maybe even earlier than that, right? When a lot of these individual tutors and bloggers were out there trying to make a living with this, and some of them have actually gone, and we've seen this firsthand, right? They've gone from a zero business as just someone out there who's trying to help out others to actually seeing that, this is something which I can make a business out of, and over time employing a team of 100 folks who's building a certain product, a certain company out there. So we actually seen this journey in a matter of few years. It's been very exciting when we look at powering some of these businesses, right? Especially when you see them going from, like I said, from a caterpillar to a full-fledged butterfly today.
So on that count, while million merchants is definitely certain scale and nowhere near scale on even compared to the vast universe that exists out there. There's no doubt about it. But along this journey, have you seen sizes of businesses or types of users or merchants change in terms of, let's say, from casual tutors who would teach maybe 10 students, for example, if we take the example of education, to complete, let's say, smaller institutes come on board because you are a little more known brand, a little more of a trusted brand. So have you seen change in the fundamental users and the merchants that are coming on to your platform?
Yes, we have. So we've seen that a lot of them have been growing over time, of course, and which has led to a lot of newer use cases come in. So when we started out, there were, like today when I look at the kind of merchants and the businesses that are on board, many of them were once, and some of them may not even new, right? They would have been existing for maybe a decade or decades prior. We never imagined a business like that could be there. But you see, you know what? It's actually a big thing. You look at, for example, I remember in the earlier days, I saw this one particular merchant trying to sell videos where they were tutoring on MS Excel and all. Right now, of course, you know that MS Excel is one of those things that people really want to be trained about. There are a lot of tutorials and videos out there. But there is still someone who is not a big company at all, who has practically a no name, is actually making a lot of money selling expensive courses on this, right? And a lot of that content is available for free. If you go to YouTube and many other sources, it's just out there. But there are still people paying for it. Why are they doing it? I, for one, I'm not convinced if I want to be paying, thousands of rupees for this, because I know this content is out there for free. But of course, there is some value with that, which that customer is seeing, right? And of course, there is something which the particular business has figured that, oh yes, I can provide something of value, which may be a little better, maybe way too much better than what is out there. And I can make, a decent enough, revenue out of this. So there have been many such cases that we've seen, right? Many of them have taken us for surprise, like totally by surprise in whatever's happening in the social space, in the content space, in terms of news content and, catering to smaller niches with news, going vernacular. There's a lot of interesting stuff which is happening out there. I think one of the exciting parts of this journey is to be able to have a kind of a bird's eye view and, what's happening in different parts of the country, in different business categories. It's just amazing.
How has the relationship or the brotherhood amongst the founders itself, have you seen that transform over the years as you've gone through maybe failures and successes, ups and downs? How has that changed? Has it stood the test of time? How has business impacted that? How has that impacted business?
I think the fact that we are still together means we stood a bit of a test of time. It hasn't, I would say, it's not that, the number of arguments or fights that we used to have that has gone down or something, but it's definitely changed. So for the first, couple of years, you're still knowing each other better, right? But we built a strong, you build a strong understanding of who the other person is, what their strengths are. And over time, and a lot of this happens subconsciously, right? But I know, for example, what is Aditya's, good areas or bad areas, right? Or how is he going to react in this? Like today, we actually don't talk as much. We used to talk a lot earlier. But today, we don't talk enough because you know what's happening. Like, I'll look at Aditya and I know what's happening, what's going through his brain. Of the same matter for Sampath. Or even if, say, on Slack, he has chatted with someone else, just by the words he's used, I know what's going through his head and I know what to predict, right? How is this thing going to shape up over the next day or weeks ahead, right? And you just assimilate that and you maybe just react or preempt or, proactively act and ensure that, things are happening smoothly. If it's for the good, great. If it's not, then you have already stepped in before a matter has gone out of hand. So I think we just know each other a lot better. That doesn't make us like each other anymore. I don't think that's ever going to change. So, but yeah, you just know what to expect. And yeah, you know where everyone's boundaries are from a mental, emotional, skill perspective in every which way, right? Today, it's very easy for me to know, you know what, this guy's going to flip out at this particular point. I can see that happening days in advance, not after it's happened. So I think that's just something which only time can tell.
So there's certain synchronicity in thinking and thoughts that has come about. That's very interesting.
So just to emphasize on this piece, right, I'll give you an example, right? So about a year back, we were hiring someone at a leadership position, and I met this person. And after I came back, of course, this was kind of a role where all of us had to meet and interview the person, right? And before we met, I told these guys, I told to one of them, you're not going to like this person. I told the other one, you're going to like this person. And I made a note of, what is it specifically that you will like and what will you not like and all, right? And I could just see how it's going to play out. I knew in the next week, both of you might meet him and whatever will happen, right? I had made a note. This is what's going to happen. At the end, are we going to hire this person or not? And on what basis and all? I just had it said. And of course, what I predicted happened exactly. So right? You know what the other person is going to like or dislike and how they're thinking.
That's fantastic. So since we talked about hiring, let's talk about culture a bit. What is Instamojo's work culture? What is it like?
What is the culture? Like, you want me to define what culture do we have?
Let's say a set of beliefs, values, not in the form of code per se, but what are some of your core beliefs and values?
So yeah, I think that's something that we've thought about, right? And I think it's something which culture is something that we never looked at very seriously in the sense that, we want to set a culture, but something that we always very, very focused on. Like, you want to have the right culture. Now, how you define, you don't know, right? But over the last year or so, I spent a fair bit of time thinking, actually, what is it, right? There's certain culture which has been developed over here, which has propagated, which has been ingrained in most of us. What is it? I think some of the things are have fun, be very, very open. I think as a company, we are very open in the sense, be open to be able to take a joke at your expense, be able to make fun of yourself, be comfortable with yourself, right? Like, I think all of us have our eccentricities and oddities and all, right? We have our quirks. Be comfortable with that. Accept that, right? I think if you don't have quirks, that's a problem. You should have quirks and you should be comfortable with it. So I think that thing, being able to think long term, I think that's something that we've been, talking a lot, right? Everything that we do has to be good for us in the longer run. We're not going to take shortcuts. We're not going to do something which is going to help us with whatever certain goals for the next quarter, right? Does it help us for a year and two? Does it help us for more than that? If it doesn't, let's not do it, right? We're not here to So being able to take a bitter pill for the short run, but to do good for the longer run, right? I think that's part of our culture of values, being able to have fun, being able to express yourself. I think if you can't express yourself, then there's a problem, right? You should be able to. And again, having said that, you have to be able to let other people around you express yourself, right? So that has to be that certain kind of camaraderie and openness in the company. That's something which we are very, very rigid about. Like, that should be there. Also, I think we live in very uncertain times, right? Because the landscape has been changing way more faster than at any other point in history, right? Purely from a tech ecosystem point of view, from an economic point of view, from political in every which way, right? Just a lot of uncertainty around. I think we have to be able to deal with that. So I think subconsciously when I'm talking to a person, or if I'm evaluating a person, right? Is this person going to be good for this company? I'm always looking at, is it good for the longer run? Is this person able to deal with uncertainty, right? Because things change, and no matter how well we make our plans and set, this is what we're going to be achieved in the next quarter and so on and so forth, things could change, right? And things do change more often than not. How will we be able to deal with that? I think some of these are part of what we are.
On the count of uncertainty, you are in the FinTech and the payment space. It is one of those spaces where, with a piece of paper or a stroke of a pen, the government and policy-making bodies can change and have drastically made changes. So how have you, but yet you are here, you continue to grow, you have scaled. How do you interpret that ecosystem, the policy-making ecosystem? Have almost all changes been enabling and helping in nature? How has that made an impact?
There have been a lot of changes. And I think the good part is that from a policy side, there are a lot of attempts being done to foster a more digital, a more formal economy, if I call it. So I think the good part is there's a lot of thought and also action on that front. at the same time, I think there has been a lot of maybe overthinking and overdoing things at times. There are many areas which I believe you should not be looking to set strict rules about, or trying to like there are certain policies which you just should not be doing, right? I strongly believe that the job of any government or regulator is to be the one who sets the rules and who's like the rest, like you get out of the game. You cannot be a player yourself. Let others be the players, right? Someone is doing the bowling, who's doing the batting, let them figure it out. But yeah, you set the rules, you ensure things are being run. So I think there have been the good and the bad. The good is, like I said, right? A lot of thought towards improving things. But yeah, I think there's been a bit of overstepping in certain cases. But I think it's also part of the ecosystem maturing as such. And we've seen a lot of changes over the past few years, right? Like just for example, right? This entire thing about how, say, how whatever happened on Facebook, did it have an impact on the US elections? Did it not? And in a matter of a year or two, we've seen a lot of policy changes across the world, right? In Singapore, in multiple countries, in Europe, in India. So I think as lawmakers, they're also waking up, or rather trying to come to terms with the fast changing world out there. So I won't always fault them for trying to do things or getting things wrong. But at the same time, yeah, maybe take a step back.
So I'm a big believer of existence of enabling infrastructure for any ecosystem to take root. So from that perspective, in a wide variety of fields, healthcare, if you take, for example, healthcare, if you have medical records and let's say waste disposal and policies and payments, it enables a set of players to make certain assumptions and say, hey, we can create some infrastructure. When you guys started, the National Payments Corporation of India was already established. They had already established the IMPS protocol, NEFT, and all of those settlement mechanisms had changed. And eventually the India stack, the Aadhaar eKYC, the PAN, all of this came into being. If you had done the same thing without that infrastructure, would you still have been able to do it with as much ease? Or do you think this infrastructure is something that has supported you in the group?
I don't know about ease. Yeah, maybe things would have been a little more difficult, but we definitely would still have been able to grow. Maybe not 1 million, maybe would have been, say, 800,000 merchants or whatever the numbers are, right? Maybe a little lesser, but we still have been able to do. I think it's the entire, all the things you mentioned, right? That's helped accelerate. And I call these things as the tide, right? I think we are one of the boats in the tide. As the tide has risen, it's helped all of us. But I think we always had a strong, sturdy enough boat. We would have been able to sail through. We still have been able to do very well. But yeah, it's helped the cause further. It's helped accelerate things much better.
So one aspect about the building of the product per se, what sort of things have you done that your competition has not done or is not doing?
I think it's all about having a very clear focus into who you are, what problem are you solving, for whom are you solving, and which is where working for MSMEs, working for small businesses, it is so critical and it's so challenging. Well, I said, right, there are millions of them. They are so scattered across the country. They are, again, so diverse in terms of business categories and in every other way, right? So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, first of all. But when you're building for such a heterogeneous audience, I'll give you an example, right? It's not that there haven't been any companies trying to build on this space. There have been many in the past, right? But there are very few that you can still name who've been able to do a great job of it. It's so very difficult. You look at globally, right? Look at companies like called Shopify or a PayPal or even a Square, right? Or if you look at an Indian parallel, who's done very well in the small business space? It would be a company like Just Dial. It would be a company like IndiaMart, right? They just IPO, right? A few months back. Now, you look at a company like them, say IndiaMart or Just Dial, they've been around for what, 2 decades? Each of them, right? And it's required a lot of focus, a lot of, I can assume good and bad things, but I'm sure there would be a lot of difficult times, right? In that journey. But it is a marathon approach. So I think when you, in the space like this, it's very important to know what is it and how are you in it for the longer run or not. Because there are certain spaces, say in the consumer space or many other spaces where you can start and you will grow like really big. Like, you can go from like what Ola did, for example, right? You go from 0 to whatever, like a unicorn or some level in a matter of 3, 4, 5 years, right? And you will do it in that span of time. If it takes you a decade to get there, it's not going to work. But there are certain other categories where it will actually take that much time, because this is not a space where you can show exponential growth year on year for like a good decade or something, right? So it will require that slog. It's very important to know that, you are there, right? And I think that is where most businesses in this space have failed, or they've essentially pivoted and, focused somewhere else. Because you know that, you are getting maybe some better traction in some other adjacent or allied space, maybe working toward a different customer audience. But the moment you get distracted from this, you're out of the game, right? So it's just having that focus, being very, very clearly aligned, this is what we want to do. And it's not that we haven't had distractions or questions or doubts about it, but I think we managed to stuck through that.
Let's talk about the funding journey. How did you start? Were you bootstrapped? When did you raise your seed? Talk to us about that.
So the interesting thing is, while I told you about the previous startup that we were trying out, so during that phase is when we went bankrupt essentially, right? Whatever little money or savings that we had were flushed down with that. And it was also during that time that we were in touch with a couple of, a few angels that were looking to raise money for that. And one of them was Rajan Anandan. So he showed a lot of interest in us and what we were doing, but he was never really convinced with what we were building, right? So he kept he stayed in touch with us, but he never invested. And during that phase when we actually stopped working on that and we were thinking of Instamojos and we started work on that, is when he pinged us one day and was just chatting and asking, so how are things going? And we told him, we stopped working on that. He was like really surprised. What happened? And then we told him, things were picking up and we moved to this. And then he felt, this sounds very interesting. Let me invest. And I think it was just like a simple chat. And of course, this is at the time when we didn't even have like a live product or something, but he just showed, because he saw that, this could lead to a big thing. So he just said, I'm in. And we're like, great. Because we were like bankrupt, right? We're like really thinking, what do we do? So I think that helped. So I think that's how we got started. Of course, over time, we raised a seed round from 500 startups. So we were one of the first companies that they invested in India. We raised from Bloom Ventures during that phase, right? So we raised a seed round from these guys. Post that, we got a few institutional investors, like Kalari came in. We had a couple of Japanese investors who came in the last couple of years. So over the last 7 years, if I call it, we've raised a total of around 10 million, which is not a lot of money, but it's been good for us to, keep growing, keep building things and, keep building a market for this.
Are you profitable yet?
No. We have been profitable in the past, and it's always that question of, do you want to invest in growth or do you want to be profitable, right? So we have and because we've been through few ups and downs in this journey, right? We always have an eye towards that. And I think at any point of time, we are never more than, 6-7 months away from being profitable. So we always keep an eye on that, we don't want to be straying too far from that. So I think that's some kind of discipline and balance that we've built over the years.
So that brings me to one question. In the Indian context, the way payments work, you have two-factor authentication. You have most of the fraud liability is actually picked up by the acquirer, right? Or almost all of it, unless there are glaring mistakes committed by, a payment gateway or a payment service provider. Given that scenario, if all of your acquisition has, all of your user acquisition has been digital, so where exactly is the focus then? Is it about product building? Is it about scaling? That's where all the money is going. Just to kind of get a perspective on that.
The majority is always in building out products and different systems, right? So when you said that, for example, India has two-factor authentication. So what that has done is it is taken away one side of the picture, which is buyers or end consumers trying to, defraud the other party, right? So that's taken away. But that still doesn't solve the merchants who are committing fraud. And there's, of course, a whole lot of them out there, right? And I think that is something which we are uniquely positioned to deal with and also to face as a challenge, is because, like I said, we are acquiring a couple of thousand merchants every single day. Now, when we do that, how do you assess if a particular merchant is what level of risk are we facing with that? How do we ascertain that? There is no physical interaction that we have with all of them, right? Or with any of them for that matter. So from day one, we realized that if this company has to scale, right? If we have to, you look at it globally, right? Companies like PayPal and Amazon have done a great job of it. What have they done really well? What has held these companies together all these years is that they have a very strong risk and fraud system. They are able to predict, identify risk in real time, filter out all the bad guys. I mean, no, that's something we'll have to build. And that's something which we have always focused on from day one. Maybe a little too early in our life, but I think that's what has helped us, or done us good in the longer run. So we have done we built a lot of algorithms, a lot of our AI actually works on that, where a merchant signs up and we have like all these flags which get alerted, right? Be it at a merchant level or at a transactional level over time, to identify what is the level of risk, what is the kind of risk that we are facing on this particular business or transaction. So it's an ongoing effort. It's like a cat and mouse game, right? Because there will always be someone who's trying to take you for a ride. If one person does it, looking at them, 10 other people automatically come in, right? So you're always trying to stay ahead of the game. You're always trying to improve the system. So yeah, there's where a lot of effort goes in. Of course, the two-factor authentication has helped from one side of the picture, but not on the other side, right? And why I said is we face this challenge uniquely is because at this scale, that's what many others are doing it, right? No one is looking at it from the sense of, I'll be acquiring a merchant a minute and, helping them come online. So for that, your systems have to be strong enough. They have to be automated and they have to be constantly improving. Yeah, a lot of effort does go there.
Let's talk about the future. Where do you go from here? Well, I understand that there is still a big part of the pie that is still up for grabs as far as India is concerned. But where do you go from here? What do the next few years from your vantage point look like?
So it's all about how do we help a business in their entire life cycle? How can I help this small business to start the business, to manage and grow their business over time, right? And when I look at that, payments is just one part of it. It's just one small part of it where we've done fairly well over the years and we've essentially solved that problem to an extent, right? Yeah, there'll always be improvements. We'll keep doing it better. But what are the other aspects of the journey, right? So the way we look at it, there are three aspects of the journey. One is commerce, one is payments, and one is credit. So a lot of effort is on the other two pillars of the business today, where we are building this entire suite of products on the commerce front, right? How do I help this business come online? How can I help you set up your own presence, be it a website, an online store? How can I help you sell your products over there? If you're selling, can I help you in shipping your products? Because again, as a small business, these are challenges that you face over the years, right? How can I help you manage your customers, engage with them, do a better job of it? Can I help you market your products online? So this entire piece in commerce where it can help you manage your presence and essentially grow that. And also the credit piece, right? You're always, there is no one, of course, who doesn't have a cash flow problem or who doesn't want to manage in a better manner. So how can I help you with cash flows? Can I actually lend money to you, which can help you grow your business better? So there's a lot of stuff we're doing over there. So it's been a little more than a year now that we launched our Mojo Capital, right? That part of the business. So we've already done like upwards of 120 crores in the past 1 year of lending money to our merchants. And that's something which is scaling up really fast. So there's a lot of plans that we have, a lot of products that we lined up in this particular space. At the same time, on the commerce front, there's a lot of things that we're doing. So yeah, it's about this entire journey of a business in helping you start, manage and grow your business over time. And that is where the core idea was, right? When we started off, that technology is going to come and how can I help you adopt technology and grow your business leveraging that? That's where we're focusing on.
So let's talk about the capital part. I say this very vocally in forums and I've said it in the past as well, that India is perhaps one of the few countries in the world where an MSME's cost of capital is still upwards of 20%.
Yes.
So somewhere between 24 to 30% is where cost of capital is. My uncle runs a small finance corporation which is 40 years old, and I see that their lending rates, they're in a tier 2 town, their lending rates 20 years ago and today are still the same.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at a different universe, the repo rate being cut and a lot of those big corporates, big companies get down to maybe the high single digits or the close to the 7 to 8 digits depending on their credit rating. But yet we continue to see a high cost of capital. If you have to recover upwards of 20% just to keep servicing a certain book of business, there is only so much value you can add.
True.
Right?
Yep.
But yet we don't see any innovation around them being able to build some sort of a credit profile, right? It is one thing for you guys to lend capital to them, but a totally different thing for you to create an ecosystem. Now, is there any thinking on those lines?
That's so we've been rethinking that entire approach from the grounds up, and we've tried, or we also experimented and seen how it works today, right? And also try to incorporate that. So you say that the cost of capital for a small business is very high, right? It's about say closer to 30%. Why is that the case? It's because serving a small business is challenging for a bank because they won't have the same level of documentation and other things that you expect or that your processes are geared for. you have a business which is worth a few hundred crores who's going to come to you. Yeah, they'll be able to furnish all the documents that you need, right? Whatever, balance sheets and many other things. A small business cannot give you that. Or the amount of time it will take for them to be able to come up with this, and then for your internal processes or systems to be able to underwrite this is very different. That's the reason why the cost is so high, right? Also, it's about acquiring those merchants and being able to recover that money from them. And the other side is, when you put in that much effort, right? As say a bank, right? Or like say a traditional NBFC, when you put in that much effort, you also want to give a loan, which is like a big enough loan where at least we will be able to cover that. But you know what? All business has a different need. A bigger business might have a requirement of 100 crores. The small guy doesn't want that. Maybe he wants 50 lakh, maybe 5 lakh. Like he has a very different requirement. So your same product approach doesn't work over there. And that is what we realized, right? Over the course of studying this, doing a few experiments and building this out is the entire approach, like we did for say payments, has to be done in credit space as well, right? You have to think it from ground up. And what we figured is there are many other products that you can actually build over there, which will solve a lot of problem for them. For example, I need not give a loan which is like, say a 12-month loan, which will like a typical term loan which you take, you grow your business and then you repay it over time, right? Maybe something like a 7-day loan will make a lot of sense for these businesses. And we did an experiment on that. It really worked very well, right? Because over there you're able to improve the experience way better. This is a product which is designed for the small business, right? Because you're not looking at giving out 1 crore in one shot to a merchant. You're looking at much like maybe a few bits of that, right? Like less than 1 lakh rupees to this business. And again, they can recover that or they can pay it back in a matter of a week or a few weeks. So we thought of that and we said, let's not take the typical products, because there is a reason why before 2010, for example, there were just a few hundred odd businesses in the country who were able to collect payments online, and now there are a few millions. Now, similar parallel, there were very small sort of businesses who a bank or NBFC will be able to give a loan to. But if you take the same approach and apply over here, that number's not going to grow, right? And that is a value we add. That is a value we add from a business which is working very closely with them, which has a lot of understanding and insights for them, and slowly focus on building for them, right? So it makes a lot of sense for me or for Instamojos as a business to give out a small loan, even say 10,000 rupees, right? Because the systems are geared for that. I do not have to give a loan which is 10 lakh or 10 crore to be able to make good on the money front. Even at a small level, I'm able to do that. That's what you get when you build from, very, very focused on who is it that you're building for, and which understanding what their problems are. And we try not to copy paste an approach, but essentially think about what is going to work for these businesses, right? What are their needs? That's how we're looking at the entire credit space and every other product that we build at, right? That's the core philosophy behind it.
So we've discussed several things. We'll discuss 2 more things. International. Is there an ambition to go international? And if and when you go international, what is that journey, or what are those thoughts like?
There's definitely an ambition. I would say there is a rough cut of a plan in our heads. It's not something as clearly documented as we'd want it to be, but we are looking international sometime towards the end of next year. So we should be doing that. Again, what specifically, which geographies, that's something that, we'll, I would say, spell out over time. That definitely is a plan because, and what we've seen, right, we've done a few experiments in this in the past, and in the very early days, we were actually international as well. And when we realized that India is a big enough market, let's focus on this today, or let's focus on this for now. And when we've done a good job of it, let's, go out. That's how we said, let's not look at international for now when we're doing it. Let's focus only on India. So then we said, yeah, we've done, this is working. And from our history, we see that, it takes a few tweaks. A small business is a small business everywhere. So yes, we would be doing that over the course of the next year. And we would be going with our entire product offering, right? Which is on the commerce front, which is on the payments front, and on the credit front. That's something we'll be doing.
And in closing, it's been almost a decade-long journey. What were some of the low points, and what were some of the high points, and what were some of the surprises?
There's like a lot of questions in there.
For you. Low points, high points, surprises. So let's say personally for you and maybe even as a team.
I think low points were always, there were a few instances where we were close to shutting down, where we didn't have any capital left in the bank, or had a very short term. So there were definitely low points, right?
Because how many times did that happen?
Couple of times, at least twice.
Initial days, later days?
Initial and later. So I think the first couple of years were always towards the edges itself. But yeah, around then and back in 2017, just a couple of years back, we had, I think we were almost close to running out of capital, which is when we actually became profitable. We carved out enough time for ourselves and then we were able to raise money after that, right? So that experience has taught us on how can we actually be profitable, and which has built that discipline, and you can never stray too far from it. Because as a business, when you are building it for the longer run, you cannot be relying on external capital all the time, right? So you always have to have your destiny in your own hands. So that's what that experience taught us. So I think some of those times were, of course, call it low, call it challenging, call it difficult, right? But yeah, you also start questioning, like, what is it that you're doing, right? Why are things working out? Why are things not working out? So those are the ones. High points are, I'm actually not a person who looks or who gets carried away with stuff, right? So I don't really look at anything as a high point as such. But I think on a day-to-day basis, you have those small moments of exuberance which come in, right? And every time there is a strong testimonial or a customer writes to us saying, this is life-changing, or this has really helped them in their business in XYZ ways. Some of those are high points. So they keep coming. Fortunately, during the good or bad times as well, there's always this constant stream of smaller high points coming in. So I think that's what keeps us going. But on the whole, it's about dealing with people, right? Your merchants are people. Your team, your employees, your partners, all of them are people, right? So most of our good and bad points or high and low points are always in those relationships. So for us, the high points are always looking at people around you, how well they're doing, are they having fun or not? You can always gauge that, right? And whenever you're seeing that, there's someone in your team who's doing very well, right? In whatever job they're doing or in their personal life, they're doing certain things very well. That's something which is usually a high, right? And that is also a strong focus culturally, right? We have to be able to, it's a community ultimately of you're building, right? Be it inside or outside, it's a community you're building. And we have to be able to foster each other and help grow each other ourselves, right? So there's a lot of those high points are seeing a lot of our employees, seeing a lot of our merchants growing. Like this example I gave you of this merchant, right? Went from zero business to a few crores worth of turnover annually, right? So yeah, man, looking at that story was something. And it's not one isolated incident, there are many of these. So some of them doing well are what the high points have always been.
Surprises, unexpected.
The fact that we are still here. I think the fact that we are still here is a surprise. But if we speak, 5 years from now and we'll still be there, it won't be a surprise then. Because I think it's not that we figured out something. We're always figuring things out. We're always learning from our own experiences and from others. But I think we've been able to build that tenacity, that resilience. That we know what we're doing is great and, we will struggle, we will fail at a lot of things, but we will get there in the longer run if we put the hearts in the right place, right? So I think surprises about that. Yeah, the fact that we've been able to tough it out, the fact that all of us still have all those debates, all those fights, but we are able to, smile or celebrate with each other. I think that's a surprise, right? So there is, I think, okay, I'll tell you one of the other things as a philosophy is what, binds us together. And this is something we've been debating since the beginning, right? What we believe is inherently people are good, right? Every person wants to do good. There are circumstances by which you may or may not, or, you may not do things which are in the greater good, right? But there is a lot of goodness out there. And that's a hypothesis that we wanted to test because we knew that if there is not inherent goodness out there, we won't be able to make a business. It's not going to work. And we've seen that, right? So we have a lot of, like I said, a lot of merchants or others who've been trying to fraud the system, who've been, doing a lot of shady and illegitimate stuff out there. But on the whole, the good is still much, much bigger, much greater. And while that was a belief that we had, that hypothesis has been tested over the years in many, many different ways. So yeah, I think that's been if not a surprise, but that's definitely been one of the pleasant aspects of being here.
So Akash, we've spoken for a little over an hour.
Okay.
You're in the FinTech space, which usually is characterized by hyper valuations, almost in the news, almost on a regular basis. You guys have a terrific game going here, but I still see the same humility and the same kind of hunger that you see in a starting team. So kudos on that. It has been a pleasure chatting with you. And there are lots of amazing takeaways and aspects in here from you guys staying together, empowering merchants that possibly had no clue how to collect an online payment and scaling to 1 million. And it still feels like you're just getting started. We wish Instamojo a big success and an amazing future ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Krishna. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
We hope you enjoyed the story. If this story made a difference to you, tell us by leaving a comment on the website or our social media channels. Help us spread the love by subscribing, liking, and sharing our show. We welcome speaker suggestions and collaborations. Write to me at nida@maharajasofscale.com.